Welcome home. Do not be startled by the dust. It is merely the skin cells of those who were filed away before you. You have arrived at a peculiar moment. I was just cataloging a record from the heart of Kuching. You know Sarawak Plaza, don't you? To you, it is a temple of shopping, a place of bright lights and consumer joy. But to me, it is a ledger of traces left behind. Tonight, we examine a file on a lesson often forgotten by the modern world. When the shutters go down, the mall ceases to be a marketplace and becomes a hunting ground for those who hunger for the essence of life. Sit. Be still. Don't forget to sign out, if you can. The sky over Kuching didn't just rain, it collapsed. A heavy Sarawakian downpour had turned the evening into a literal wall of water, blurring the neon signs of the city into smears of light. Shella stood at the glass entrance of Sarawak Plaza, the cold air conditioning of the mall at her back and the humid, thundering chaos of the storm in front of her. She searched her bag, but the realization hit her like a physical blow. She had forgotten her umbrella in the office. The mall was closing. The security guards were already rattling the chains on the distant side exits. With the rain showing no sign of stopping and the discomfort of her cycle weighing heavily on her, she decided on one last quick dash to the restroom before the final shutters fell. The mall feels different when the crowds vanish. The vibrant, bustling energy is replaced by a sterile, predatory silence. As Shella hurried deeper into the complex, the polished marble floors acted like dark mirrors, reflecting things that shouldn't have been there. Her footsteps, usually a soft rhythmic click, echoed too loudly against the high ceilings, sounding as if someone, or something, was walking exactly 3 steps behind her. Every time she spun around, the long, distorted shadows of mannequins seemed to shift just a fraction too late, as if they were settling back into a frozen pose. She found the restroom tucked away near the back elevators, a dimly lit corner of the mall that felt decades older than the renovated storefronts. Usually, a janitor's trolley or a security guard would be stationed nearby, but the desk was abandoned, and the hallway was utterly deserted. The only sound was the rhythmic, dying buzz of the overhead fluorescent lights. They flickered intermittently, casting sharp, nervous shadows that danced across the entrance like skeletal fingers. The air here was stagnant, smelling of old bleach and something else, something sweet and cloying that didn't belong in a public toilet. Inside the restroom, the silence was even more profound. Shella retreated to the very last stall, the one furthest from the door. As she sat, the physical toll of her period made her movements heavy and sluggish. She reached into her bag for a fresh sanitary pad, a modern, convenient, disposable luxury. In the rush of the modern world, the warnings of her grandmother had been discarded like old junk. Always wash the blood away, the old woman would say, or you invite those who feast on the essence. Shella scoffed at the memory. Nobody washed their pads anymore, it was a chore of the past. Without a second thought, she rolled up the used pad and tossed it into the small, rusted metal bin beside the toilet bowl. She didn't realize that in this silent, empty mall, the scent of fresh blood was not just a waste product, it was a dinner invitation. She was about to reach for the door lock when a sound stopped her heart, a dry, rasping scratch echoing from directly above her. It wasn't the scuttle of a rat or the groan of a building settling. It was the sound of long, sharp nails dragging slowly across the metal air vent in the ceiling. The air in the tiny stall turned freezing, and Shella's breath hitched, forming a faint mist. Then, from the slats of the vent, something began to emerge. A lock of long, wet, oily black hair began to spiral down like a snake. It inched closer and closer to her shoulder, swaying with a life of its own, while a patch of pale, gray skin became visible through the metal grid above. Panic, cold and sharp, finally broke her paralysis. Shella burst out of the stall, her bat clutched to her chest, and threw herself at the main restroom exit. She grabbed the handle and pulled, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt as heavy as a solid stone slab, held shut by an unseen, monumental force. Trembling, She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with cold sweat. The screen illuminated her terrified face, but it mockingly displayed no service. There was no signal in the bowels of the mall. She backed away toward the sinks, splashing icy water on her face to fight the rising hysteria, but as she looked up into the cracked mirror, she saw the door to the last stall behind her beginning to creak open once more. A cloying, thick scent suddenly filled the room, a nauseating mixture of sweet jasmine and iron-rich rot. Through the reflection in the cracked mirror, Shella saw a dark, twisted silhouette crouched low over the bin in the last stall. The entity was gaunt, its spine protruding in sharp ridges through a tattered white shroud. It was sniffing the air with a frantic, animalistic hunger. Shella watched, paralyzed, as the figure began making a wet, rhythmic sucking sound. It was feasting on the essence of the tree she had so carelessly thrown away. The sound was like a predator cleaning a bone, wet and enthusiastic in the dead silence of the mall. The entity stopped. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, snapping toward the mirror. Shella saw its face, or what was left of one. Long, tangled hair-shrouded features that were pale as bone, with eyes that were nothing but hollow, dark pits. It knew she was watching. The sucking sound stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hiss that vibrated through the floorboards. The creature began to uncoil itself from the stall, its long, skeletal fingers gripping the top of the partition. It wasn't just a ghost, it was a physical manifestation of a hunger that had been denied for too long. Desperation finally overcame Shella's terror. Her eyes darted around the room and landed on the janitor's bucket by the sinks. Inside was a large, industrial-sized bottle of harsh, pungent bleach. Remembering how the old story said spirits hated strong, artificial stenches that masked the scent of life, she grabbed the bottle. With a scream of pure defiance, she hurled it toward the last stall. The plastic cracked upon impact, and the sharp, chemical sting of ammonia exploded into the air. The entity let out a bone-chilling shriek, a sound that combined the wail of a woman with the screech of a dying animal. As the chemical fog filled the restroom, the cloying scent of jasmine was suppressed. The creature recoiled, hissing and clawing at the air as if the bleach were acid to its lungs. In that moment of distraction, the heavy weight pressing against the exit door vanished. Shella didn't wait. She threw her entire body weight against the door, and this time, it swung wide. She burst out into the dark mall atrium, the sound of her own gasping breath the only thing she could hear over the distant roar of the storm outside. She ran past the silent, frozen escalators that looked like giant metallic tongues. The atrium was a cavern of shadows. Every shop window she passed seemed to contain a movement, a flicker of white fabric, a flash of long hair. She could hear the creature behind her, not running, but moving through the vents and along the ceiling, the scratching sound of its nails a constant, terrifying accompaniment to her flight. The mall entrance felt miles away, a small square of gray light in a world of black. Shella burst through the heavy glass entrance of Sarawak Plaza and was immediately swallowed by the storm. The street was flooded, the water rising to her ankles, and the rain was so thick it was blinding. She stumbled toward her car, her hands shaking so violently that she dropped her keys into the dark, swirling water. Sobbing, she plunged her hands into the cold muck, feeling for the metal. Her fingers closed around them just as she felt a cold draft on the back of her neck, a draft that smelled of jasmine. She scrambled into the car and slammed the locks, the engine finally roaring to life as a flash of lightning illuminated the empty street. Inside the car, the sound of the rain hitting the roof was deafening, but it provided a sense of sanctuary. Shella sat for a moment, her forehead resting on the steering wheel, her chest heaving. She was safe. The doors were locked, the engine was running, and the mall was behind her. She began to put the car in gear, her mind already racing toward her brightly lit apartment and the safety of her bed. But the feeling of being watched, the sensation that had followed her through the mall, refused to dissipate. An icy urge, a compulsion she couldn't resist, forced her to look up at the building she had just escaped. High above the flooded street, on the third floor, was the small, frosted window of the restroom. It was the only light left on in the entire plaza, glowing with a sickly, jaundiced yellow hue. Pressed against the glass was a pale, terrifying face. The entity wasn't moving, it was simply staring down at the car. Even from that distance, Shella could see the long black hair framing the glass and the way the creature's nostrils flared. It was still sniffing the air, tracking the scent she had left behind, the scent that was now inside the car with her. Shella drove home in a trance, but the sanctuary of her house felt thin. As she lay in bed that night, the rain finally tapering off to a drizzle, she realized the smell of jasmine hadn't stayed at the mall. It was faint, drifting from the air conditioning vent above her bed. Then, she heard it, a dry, rhythmic scratching against the metal slats of the vent. The past isn't always buried. Sometimes, it follows the traces you leave behind, waiting for the next invitation. Shella made it home that night, but the archive never truly releases a record once it has been marked. Every night, she hears that scratching at her bedroom vent, a reminder that some hungers are never satisfied. Remember, my friends, the past isn't always buried. Sometimes, it is just waiting for you to leave a trace. A footprint, a drop of blood, a forgotten memory. These are the things that draw the feaster. Sleep well, if you can. And do subscribe, we wouldn't want your file to go missing in the dark. Welcome home.